After the recent experience I had in theatres with the Anand L. Rai directed film Tere Ishq Mein, I couldn't help but feel like most of the director's filmography falls in the category of absolutely crumbling post the interval. Rightfully, the director was called out with his consistent writer Himanshu Sharma with the meme from The Office that aptly seems to represent his screenplay.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
This made me wonder about Indian movies and their structure and how it is exclusive to India. Movies from a theoretical and practical perspective have a 3-act structure, essentially the setup, confrontation and resolution. However, India is the only market where there is a break in such a narrative, something that is consciously designed in the screenplay. You will only see this in Indian film discourse that an interval block is being discussed on forums. This reminds me of the Rediff interview that Raja Sen had done with Karan Johar during the release of My Name is Khan when asked about why Indian movies don't take genres seriously. And Johar had mentioned on how no other cinema in the world has an interval and one doesn't realize how drastic that makes your storytelling structure. That one gap in narrative actually changes the way we write our films, which is our USP. It's what sets us apart. But it's a huge deterrent. We would write films differently if we didn't have an interval, but we have to. So you start, you peak, you pitch, you stop. You build again, you peak, you pitch. So you have 2 peaks and 2 pitches and 2 finales in your film, which you don't realize actually. 90% of the problem with our script is that. And I think some creators have mastered this structure while others get one part right but absolutely crumble when it comes to the second part.
What happens when you stop narrative, you peak and stop because it's important that you get that big blast of an interval point. Otherwise you can't walk out with a discussion. And then you come back and you're going right back. So then you restart your film and you have to peak again. Now that 9 out of 10 people don't get it right.
Through this video, I want to discuss movies that slowly crumbled post the interval. Movies that made you feel like you were absolutely witnessing peak cinema in the first half, but your faith in the film slowly dwindled as the narrative of the second half commenced. Do write down which films according to you actually fits this experience in theatres. I would love to see it if it features on the list. So getting right into it, here is Tried&Refused Productions with When the Second Half Ruins Good Indian Movies. Retro. This movie and its ultimate fate genuinely breaks my heart because it was one of the most anticipated movies of the year for me and what I assumed would be Surya's big comeback. The first half of Retro is genuinely electric. Karthik Subbaraj set up a world that felt grimy, kinetic and so technically proficient. The wedding long shot is still etched in my memory like I just watched it yesterday. The neo-noir atmosphere, the compelling performances, Santosh Narayanan's epic music, everything felt immersive and engaging. But as the second half rolled around the corner, the film took the shape of a headless chicken, packing in so many elements that it genuinely became confusing. The only riveting portion of the film included Pari's arc of a smile that has been hidden in the depths of childhood trauma that slowly emerges, becoming one of the most beautiful moments in film I had seen this year. However, the second half is way too cluttered for its own good. There are therapy sessions aimed at spreading laughter, there is an irritating tatted up warlord on an island, extremely hammy performances, there are gladiator-like war games, an origin story that has roots in the island's history, and an exhausting trope of the chosen one done to death that made a spectacular first half almost crash due to the sheer amount of themes that Subbaraj wanted to fit in. Tiger 3. This is a part of the YRF spyverse that had everything going for it. The hype associated with it, the Khans being unanimously celebrated for sharing screen space together in the previous outing, and all they had to do was provide a compelling narrative. This was partially effective in the first half. We actually got insight about Zoya's origin story. The hook that keeps us going is Tiger and Zoya's son being under Atish, played by Imran Hashmi's custody, and the old crew joining hands together. However, everything seemed to fall apart rather than peak even after the interval. Pathan's cameo in rescuing Tiger was more comical than stylistic. Imran Hashmi as the villain barely making us feel a sense of intimidation and threat. But I think the main reason why the audience eventually disconnected was because the entire premise is set up for Imran Hashmi to get access to PAL codes. This can be utilized to annihilate the biggest of cities, wipe out huge populations, Congratulations, you've set up the character to detest India. But the main mission of the film is to reinstate democracy in Pakistan. I was so confused on how mass India will connect with the film, where the main battle is about protecting the Pakistan Prime Minister. I get the modus operandi of the YRF spy universe. It's essentially to communicate the concept of peace between India and Pakistan. But wouldn't Atish using PAL codes to cause destruction in India be a far greater threat mass India will connect with versus protecting democracy in Pakistan, leading to an overall middling affair? Fan. I still feel like Fan, directed by Manish Sharma, still has one of the most riveting first halves in commercial Hindi cinema. The concept, the tension, the eerie and creepy tone embraced by Shah Rukh Khan really made people wonder that we may be witnessing something special. Shah Rukh Khan delivered one of his most complex and committed performances as Gaurav, and the first half is nothing short of perfect. A toxic, obsessive and increasingly unhinged Fan was a straight up horror film. But somewhere after the interval, as it clocks for Gaurav that his idol is not the image that he conjured up with his obsession, Fan stopped being a psychological thriller and turned into a high-budget chase sequence across continents. The grounded tension of the first half disappears, stripping it away from realism and exchanging it for elements that made it like any other YRF action film. You had bike chases, hide-and-seek games in wax museums, characters sliding down buildings, and one noticed this tonal shift in the film, leading to most feeling that an exceptional premise, a star willing to get into the depths of darkness, was somewhat lost in the pursuit of spectacle. Odum Kuthira, Chapdum Kuthira. This is a movie that I saw when it released digitally. A movie that was panned so heavily that it was one of the biggest disasters of Malayalam cinema this year. And when I saw it, I realized why people were so frustrated with it. You know, there is a whimsical madness to this movie, a self-aware, absurdist pitch that is not for all but is still intriguing. Fahad and Kalyani Priyadarshan's odd but endearing relationship and the stumbling blocks they face as the story develops till the interval had me smiling with joy. Lal's antics with his wacky t-shirts and want to get hitched again signed me up for this ride. However, the tonal shift of this movie post the interval with the integration of Revati's character had me more confused than interested. It completely derails the storytelling, treats a sensitive topic in a frivolous manner, and the charm and wit also get stripped away from the film, becoming stale and boring in the process, making one wonder why such a detour happened in the first place and made audiences wish anything with Fahad and Kalyani would have worked, no matter how absurd it was, rather than this detour taken by the screenplay after the interval. Runway 34. One of the directors from Hindi cinema who has not reached his true potential, but audiences still see glimmers of brilliance in his directorial filmography, is Ajay Devgan. I still stand by the fact that the first half of Runway 34 is one of the tightest pieces of aviation filmmaking in India. It's technically proficient, stylized, and the sequences in dealing with the challenging weather was nothing short of masterful. The movie actually peaks in the interval as the landing is taking place as Jasleen Royal's The Fall plays in the background. But post the interval, the movie shifts from an aviation thriller to a courtroom procedural, and this leads to a very flat narrative that is not even as marginally engaging as the events that followed in the flight. While both Amitabh Bachchan and Ajay Devgan are competent in their roles, the court questioning, barring one small detail, play out like a recap of the events we had already seen. The film made audiences really wonder on how it would have been actually brilliant if the screenplay was non-linear and had left the events of the flight for its second half. An effective film that I think got weighed down due to the predictable nature in which it was structured. Jaat. I really went into theatres with zero expectations from this film, but I can't begin to tell you what a ball I was having in the first half of this film. Imagine a movie where the entire thread of the first half is the leading hero getting pissed off that he is not getting an apology because someone inconvenienced him while he was eating idli. The thread continues hilariously till the interval until Sunny Deol crosses paths with Randeep Hooda. It's here when the film falls in the trap of becoming this larger-than-life national threat movie where Sunny Deol himself will save the country, where it absolutely loses the plot and becomes like every other generic commercial star-led film. We went from a self-aware, funny and petty squabble getting out of hand to elements of uranium, the Sri Lanka civil war, genocide in villages, a reveal of our leading man being the most decorated army man, and it transitioned to absolutely silly territory, making me genuinely bummed out as the movie showed glimpses of being different than just a generic outing at the movies. Leo. I kid you not when I say that Leo First Day First Show was a festival. Riding high of the success of Vikram, the hype was unprecedented, and the first half genuinely delivered on so many accounts. Parthiban's swagger, the iconic title card, the simple life with the family that comes to an abrupt halt with a gruesome cafe action set piece. Vijay gave it all, piquing the interest of the audience. Is this just an ordinary man or someone with a brutal past? How does he have such rage as he annihilates everyone in the open market? The film peaked with the interval frame reveal. However, the free fall in the quality of writing in the second half was shocking. The villains played by Sanjay Dutt and Arjun Sarja were forgettable. Connections to the LCU seemed lazy, and the exploration of the origin story seemed to take the shape of last-minute assignment work being conjured up. You had themes of human sacrifice and a cult-like obsession manifesting into murders that just did not connect with the audience, leading to a very scrappy conclusion of events, which also shaped up, in my opinion, into becoming the death of the LCU too. Animal. Talk about hype, and I think all of us will reflect on what the atmosphere was in theatres in 2023 in December. You would admit that it was through the roof. Sandeep Reddy Vanga invigorated such rage and madness in the first half of Animal that I was absolutely hooked from the first frame. Of course, Vanga had his isms of shock value dispersed in the dialogues, but the madness was so engaging to watch. A simmering family tension, an unhinged son willing to do anything for his father, vowing for vengeance and willing to burn the world in the process. I still remember when Runway gathered his cousins, how pumped I was to see the war that will commence. When the film reached its interval point, when all the mayhem in a power-packed action sequence concluded, I wondered where this film will go now. And honestly, it went in directions that I believe dampened the film's overall impact. You had a sick pot-bellied Runway ranting and raving at his house, constantly bickering with his wife, being cured and then ending up having an affair with Tripti Dimri, all for intel, and this transition just got progressively frustrating, especially Tripti Dimri's subplot. While Bobby's role provided some respite, I think the odd creative decisions of the movie in the second half crumbled the brilliant build-up of the first. Zero. A lot of people when they watched Tere Ishq Mein were reminded of what happened with Zero starring Shah Rukh Khan. An enjoyable, fun and entertaining movie initially that transitioned into the absolute absurd and over-the-top in the second half. Bawwa, a film-obsessed, vertically challenged man who is on the lookout for a matrimonial match, commenced with such zany humor. It had a pitch that was genuinely engaging, and Bawwa's evasive ways culminating in heartbreak for Afia was still partly engaging. However, where the movie absolutely loses its track is when it transitions to New York. This is where you have SRK running through Times Square in his chaddis, processing the grief of not being with Afia, engages in NASA training so that he can be sent to Mars, gets selected, and all of this leading to an eventual romantic reunion just before takeoff, making me facepalm on just when I thought this movie was getting absurd. It would take another bizarre turn. And the worst second half, hands down for me, for a movie that I did not mind till the first half, but got so visibly frustrated with the second half that I almost wanted to walk out of the theatre. Drum roll, please. You guessed it right. It's Professor X's cameo in Dil Hai Mushkil. You know how obsessed I am with this film. Ek tarfa pyar tak theek tha, the songs helped in staying engaged. I was more interested in Ranbir and Aishwarya really figuring out their relationship, and the moment Anushka Sharma announced herself as Lex Luthor, I immediately clocked out, making a passable first half absolutely getting derailed with the most dumb twist known in film.
I'm definitely the Ranbir in the story, and therefore I killed Anushka. You don't love someone who loves you that much, you gotta die.